Welcome to the Midnight Files channel. In the summer of 1587, more than 100 English men, women, and children stepped onto the shores of a small island off the coast of what we now call North Carolina. They were filled with hope, tasked with establishing England's first permanent settlement in the New World. Their governor was an artist named John White, who had been to these shores before. Among the settlers were his pregnant daughter Eleanor and her husband Ananias Dare. Within weeks, Eleanor gave birth to a baby girl. They named her Virginia Dare, and she became the first English child born in what would one day become the United States of America. But Virginia's life, like the fate of the entire colony, would become one of history's most enduring mysteries. This is the story of the lost colony of Roanoke. The Roanoke colony was not England's first attempt to settle this region. In 1584, Sir Walter Raleigh, a favorite of Queen Elizabeth I, had been granted permission to explore and colonize North America. That year, an expedition led by Philip Amadas and Arthur Barlow explored the outer banks and made contact with local Native American tribes, including the Croatoans of Hatteras Island. They met a man named Manteo, a Croatoan chief, who would become a crucial ally to the English. In 1585, a second expedition arrived. This was a military venture of over 100 men, led by Sir Richard Grenville. They built a fort on Roanoke Island, but the mission was a disaster. The soldiers relied heavily on local Native Americans for food, straining relationships to the breaking point. When the English leader heard rumors that an Algonquin chief planned to cut off their food supply, he made a fateful decision. He killed the chief in what he believed was a preemptive strike. This act poisoned English-Native relations in the region for years to come. By 1586, when Sir Francis Drake stopped by, on his way back from raiding Spanish ships, the starving soldiers begged for passage home. They left behind just 15 men to maintain England's claim to the territory. That brings us to 1587 and John White's expedition. This time, the plan was different. Rather than a military outpost, they would establish a true colony, a city of Raleigh with families who would build a permanent settlement. The original plan was to settle near Chesapeake Bay, about 50 miles north of Roanoke Island. But when they stopped at Roanoke in July to check on the 15 men left behind, they found only a single skeleton at the abandoned fort. Then their ship's pilot, Simon Fernandez, made a decision that would seal the colony's fate. He refused to take them any farther north. Whether this was because of approaching hurricane season or other motives, well, never know. But on July 22, 1587, 117 colonists were left on Roanoke Island. They repaired the old fort and structures. Just days later, tragedy struck. A colonist named George Howe was killed by members of the Roanoke tribe, the same tribe, whose chief had been murdered 2 years earlier. John White led a retaliatory raid, but in a terrible mistake, they attacked the wrong village, killing a member of the friendly Croatoan tribe. With tensions high and winter approaching, the colonists faced a dire situation. They had arrived too late in the growing season to plant sufficient crops. Their relations with local tribes were damaged. They desperately needed supplies from England, but there was also joy during those difficult weeks. On August 18, 1587, Eleanor Dare gave birth to her daughter Virginia. The baby was baptized 6 days later on August 24th at a ceremony also attended by Manteo, who was christened into the Church of England. Virginia Dare's birth should have been a symbol of hope for the new colony's future. Instead, just 3 days after Virginia's baptism, on August 27th, the colonists made a difficult decision. They asked John White to return to England for supplies. White was reluctant to leave his daughter and newborn granddaughter, but the colony's survival depended on it. Before he left, White and the colonists agreed on a system. If they had to move, they would carve the name of their destination into a tree. If they were forced to leave under duress or attack, they would add a Maltese cross to the carving. John White departed for England, promising to return within a few months. He had no idea it would be 3 years before he saw Roanoke Island again. When White reached England in October 1587, he immediately began preparing to return with supplies. But history intervened. In 1588, King Philip II of Spain launched the Spanish Armada, a massive fleet. intended to invade England. Queen Elizabeth I issued a general stay of shipping, commandeering every available vessel for England's defense. Walter Raleigh tried to help White, but the Queen's orders were absolute. In early 1588, White managed to scrape together two small ships, the Brave and the Roe. But even this attempt ended in disaster when French pirates attacked, stealing all of White's supplies and badly wounding him. He was forced to return to England. Another year passed, then another. White watched helplessly as the seasons changed, knowing his family was waiting for him across the ocean. Finally, in March 1590, he secured passage on a privateering expedition that agreed to stop at Roanoke. But privateering comes first for such ships, and they didn't reach the Outer Banks until mid-August. On August 18, 1590, exactly 3 years to the day after Virginia Dare's birth, and now her third birthday, John White went ashore. The landing was treacherous. Before White even reached the island, 7 sailors drowned in the dangerous surf. When the party finally made it to Roanoke, they saw smoke rising from the island. Hope surged through White's heart. Perhaps it was a signal fire. But as they approached the settlement, they found only a wildfire burning through the woods. They called out. No one answered. They found fresh footprints in the sand, but they were Native American tracks, not English. When they reached the site of the settlement, John White's hopes crumbled. The houses were gone, not burned, not destroyed by violence, but deliberately taken down. In their place stood a palisade, a defensive wall made of trees. On one of the main posts, carved clearly into the wood, was a single word, Croatoan. White searched desperately for the Maltese cross that would indicate his family had been forced to leave under attack. There was none. Earlier, they had also found the letters carved into a tree. No cross there either. According to their agreement, this meant the colonists had left voluntarily. And Croatoan was not a mystery. It was the name of Hatteras Island, about 50 miles south of Roanoke, home to Manteo's friendly tribe. White was certain he knew where his family had gone. He begged the ship's captain to take him to Croatoan Island, but nature had other plans. A hurricane struck, damaging the ships and driving them out to sea. The captain refused to risk another attempt. John White was forced to sail back to England, leaving the mystery unsolved. He never returned to America. White died in 1593, never knowing what became of his daughter Eleanor, his son-in-law Ananias, his granddaughter, Virginia, or the other 114 colonists. For over 400 years, the lost colony of Roanoke has captured the American imagination. Theories have ranged from the plausible to the fantastical. Were they killed by disease? Did Spanish forces march up from Florida and slaughter them? Were they absorbed into Native American tribes? Some have even suggested supernatural explanations or alien abduction. But in recent years, archaeology has begun to provide answers, and the story that's emerging suggests that the colony was never truly lost at all. Since 1998, archaeologists have been conducting excavations on Hatteras Island, which was once called Croatoan. What they've found is remarkable. A 10-karat gold signet ring, likely belonging to an English nobleman, pieces of Elizabethan swords, gun parts from 16th century English firearms, fragments of European pottery, a slate writing tablet with English lettering still visible. In May 2025, researchers even found piles of iron flakes, the byproduct of blacksmithing, suggesting the colonists were forging tools they needed to survive. These artifacts aren't from trade. They show signs of being repurposed out of desperation. Wine glass fragments turned into arrowheads, door hinges twisted into drills. These are the marks of people adapting to survive in a new world, blending English and Native American ways of life. Other archaeological teams have found evidence at sites inland, suggesting the colony may have split into multiple groups. Some may have traveled northwest to the Chowan River area, guided by markings on a map John White himself had drawn. Historical documents from the later Jamestown colony, established 17 years after Roanoke, contain intriguing clues. English explorer John Lawson wrote in 1701 that the Croatoans told him several of their ancestors were white people and could talk in a book as we do. In 1710, English missionary named John Ermstone wrote that people from Hatteras came to be baptized, describing them as half Indian and half English. The emerging picture is this: when John White failed to return as promised, the colonists made a rational decision. Winter was coming. They had limited food. Their best chance of survival was to join their Native American allies. Some likely went to Croatoan Island, where Manteo's tribe would have welcomed them. Others may have moved inland to other friendly Native communities. Over time, they would have integrated fully into Native American society. The English children, including Virginia Dare, would have grown up speaking Algonquian languages, learning native ways of hunting and farming, marrying into the tribes. Within a generation or two, their English heritage would have become just a part of their family history, passed down in stories. The lost colony was never lost. They left a clear message telling John White exactly where they went. The mystery only became a mystery later, when 19th century writers romanticized the story. The idea of English colonists assimilating with Native Americans was uncomfortable for later generations. It challenged their assumptions about European superiority and manifest destiny. A mysterious disappearance made for a better, more dramatic story. But the truth, now supported by archaeology and historical documents, is simpler, more human. The Roanoke colonists did what people have always done when faced with impossible circumstances. They adapted, they made alliances, they survived. Somewhere in the genealogy of Native American families in North Carolina, the descendants of Eleanor Dare, Virginia Dare, and the other Roanoke colonists likely still live today. The colony didn't vanish. It transformed, becoming part of the complex, multicultural story of early America. The real mystery isn't what happened to the lost colony. The real mystery is why we've insisted for so long on calling them lost when they left such clear directions about where they were going. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.